Sleep behavior change follows many of the same kind of stages of change that we recognize for things like exercise adherence. So if we go back to, and a lot of folks are familiar with the 5 stages of change, and for those of you who want, I'm going to kind of break this down in the way of sleep. So in the pre-contemplation stage, we can identify a patient in this stage of change when they don't see sleep as a problem. So, this is an opportunity where we can plant the seed. We can kind of say, have you noticed your pain flares up after a few bad nights of sleep or a bad night of rest? Or have you noticed that your performance during sport has decreased on nights where maybe you've stayed up to cram for an exam, or perhaps spending all night doom scrolling on your phone prior to like game day, things of that nature. Moving forward, we might catch someone in the contemplation stage. They're kind of weighing all the factors out. So they might come in and say, I feel like sleep has some sort of impact on my performance, on my symptomology. And to kind of like help that along into like the next stage, we can ask reflective questions to kind of help them along that stream of thought. So that next stream of thought is going to be the preparation phase, and this is where we can really start to gain momentum in regard to moving towards creating behavior changes around sleep. So this is where we can think of creating small, realistic steps to start chipping away at creating more habits kind of formed in a chain to prepare for rest. Things like starting with a time away from screens, a perhaps diaphragmatic breathing or yoga type practice, or meditation prior to sleeping, reading for pleasure, not engaging in stressful activity or non-sleep activity in bed, things of that nature, and just like kind of starting with one at a time and adding those up to create an overall change in the sleep quality. And so, when we get folks to be able to take action, which is the next stage in this process, this is where consistency starts to build into this, like, I've got this self-agency that I can take ownership over this. I'm getting some good traction. I can see where this is going in a positive way. And then, the hope is that by post-discharge, they now have this maintenance phase where they can just maintain these habits, hopefully for a lifetime, and continue to build on those in constructive ways. And so when we're thinking about doing all this too, like, we definitely want to think about meeting folks where they are. We can't, take someone who is presenting to us in the pre-contemplative stage and just assume that they're going to take our calls to action and just say, oh, yep, my physical therapist said to do it, I'm going to get on it. It doesn't work that way. This is behavioral psychology 101. We got to meet people where they are and work with them from there. So when helping patients sleep better, it's not about giving them more information again. We've got to meet them where they are, like I was just mentioning. We have to understand where they are in that readiness. Just like with exercise adherence, sleep behavior change moves through these stages. And I like to think of some strategies that we can use. We can borrow from motivational interviewing. So a lot of people have heard of motivational interviewing, but maybe like, well, cool, I know it's good, I know I should do it, but tell me about it. What do I gotta know? So here are some of the highlights, or the greatest hits, if you will, of some motivational interviewing basics in regard to sleep coaching. So PACE is an acronym for partnership, acceptance, compassion, evocation. So this is where we're building collaboration and not necessarily just expecting compliance for the sake of compliance. So here we're looking at guiding as a partnership our patients towards accepting that there's something to change, having compassion for them, knowing that change is difficult, and evoking said change by establishing that collaborative movement. Motivational interviewing also has this nice like flow of engagement, focus, evoking change, created plan moving forward. We have another acronym, READS, and this is one that kind of reminds us to roll with resistances that are going to be expected with just natural behavioral, psychology that we see in people every day, including ourselves. Instead of fighting against folks on it. So we want to roll with their resistance, like I said, express empathy. Avoid argumentation. We don't want to create enemies here. We're not butting heads. We're working together. We want to look at any sort of discrepancies that are here and develop plans for those. We want to support self-efficacy because we're not just looking at a patient in front of us and treating them in the here and now. We're planning to have them be successful post-discharge, and so we got to think of establishing that self-efficacy. Another acronym that motivational interviewing provides us is OARS, or asking open questions, providing affirmations, reflecting meaningfully, and then providing summaries. So these everyday kind of micro skills can really make patients feel heard, and these are just some of the cheat codes that you can kind of think about, perhaps write on a sticky note and put on your workstation to just kind of help remind you to build a partnership, be empathetic, help people feel heard so that they can move forward with you as a team. So, am I in practice? Just some examples of some things that we might think about. Again, we're not looking to create these compliant worker bees. We have to ask curious questions. So we can't expect change to happen just because we said you should get more sleep. We have to ask about how does sleep how does your pain reflect when you get poor sleep or good sleep? Ask these kind of questions. We don't necessarily want to harp on people and jump towards correct. Here's all the things you do wrong. We want to reflect on, what are the barriers, or, man, your whole day as a mom of 3 and you work part-time and you're responsible for all the house workings, it's no wonder you have a hard time mellowing out at the end of the night because you haven't had any time to process anything for yourself. So it's figuring out, how do I help this person decompress before they get to sleep so they're not laying awake straining out their eyelids for an hour. These are curious questions we gotta ask our folks. And, we're not just educating, we're working towards evoking change. So, thinking about what would make better sleep possible for you. Again, looking at those barriers.